Ladies and gentlemen, when I was younger, I had an idea of what life should be. I thought I knew the rules, the things that would guarantee me happiness, success, and a life well lived. But with age, time has a way of showing you how little you really know. At 60, there are things I no longer believe in, and perhaps it's time for us all to let go of certain illusions that we've clung to for far too long. First, I no longer believe in the illusion of time as an enemy. In my youth, I raced against the clock, believing every second lost was a second wasted. Now I've come to understand that time is not something to be feared or rushed through. It is simply a thread, winding its way through the tapestry of our lives, and it unfolds as it's meant to. Time is not our adversary, but our companion, and it teaches us to appreciate the quiet moments in between the hustle. I also no longer believe in the need for approval. We spend so much of our lives trying to gain the approval of others, and it often leaves us feeling hollow. After 60, I've learned that true peace comes from within. The need for validation fades when you realize that your worth is not contingent on others' opinions. It is found in the way you live, in your actions, in your truth. And then there's the myth of perfection. I used to think that everything had to be flawless. My work, my relationships, my life. But perfection is an illusion, a construct that stifles creativity and joy. Imperfection is the true beauty of life. It's in our flaws, our mistakes, our vulnerabilities that we find our humanity. And that, I believe, is the most wonderful thing. Fear of change. How many of us have held on to that one, desperately trying to resist what's inevitable? After 60, I've learned to embrace change, not fear it. It's the changes, the challenges, the unforeseen twists that make life worth living. They shape us, mold us, and make us more than we were before. Change is not something to run from. It is something to step into with open arms. For much of my life, I believed that material success was the true measure of a life well lived. The bigger house, the fancier car, the accolades and the recognition. But I've learnt that true fulfillment doesn't come from possessions or achievements. It comes from relationships, from experiences, from the way we make others feel. The things we accumulate cannot fill the soul in the way love, kindness, and connection can. And then there was comfort. I used to think that comfort was the ultimate goal, that if I could just settle into a predictable, easy life, I would find contentment. But comfort, my friends, can be a cage. A life without challenges is a life without growth. It is the trials we face, the obstacles we overcome, that shape us into who we are meant to be. The need for control. Another myth I've outgrown. We cannot control life. We can't dictate the events, the people, the circumstances that come our way. Life has a way of surprising us, and trying to control it only leads to frustration. I've learned to let go, to trust in the flow of life. And when you let go of the need to control, you find peace. There was a time when I believed that living a long life was the ultimate measure of success. But longevity means little if you don't live with purpose. A life full of meaning, of love, of growth. That is the life worth living. The depth of your experiences far outweighs the number of years you have. And happiness. How many of us have chased it, believing it was something we could catch if we just tried hard enough? But happiness is not a destination. It's a choice. It's the way you choose to see the world, the way you decide to find joy in the smallest moments, even when life doesn't go as planned. Lastly, I no longer believe in the idea that life must follow a script. For much of my younger years, I had a vision of how things should unfold. But life is not a screenplay. It is a series of unexpected moments. When we let go of our rigid expectations, we free ourselves to experience life as it is, unpredictable, messy, and beautiful. So, I stand before you today, having shed these beliefs not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who has learned to embrace the questions. Life, after 60, becomes less about achieving and more about living. It's about finding peace with who you are, accepting what you cannot control, and savoring the moments that truly matter. The illusion of time is one of the greatest deceptions we fall victim to in our younger years. We are taught to view time as a limited resource, something that slips away from us with every passing second, and with it, our opportunities. The clock becomes a constant reminder of what we haven't achieved, of the goals that remain out of reach. We rush through life, constantly chasing after the next moment, the next milestone, always looking ahead and rarely stopping to appreciate the now. But after 60, you come to realize that time is not something we lose, but something we live within. It doesn't move in a straight line as we once thought, but instead unfolds in layers, in rhythms, and in cycles. What once seemed like a relentless march toward an unknown future becomes a more delicate and harmonious dance. You begin to understand that time is not our enemy, but our companion, revealing its true nature as something that brings wisdom, growth, and the quiet realization that life is not meant to be raced through. Rather, it's meant to be savored, cherished in the moments we often overlook. The need for approval is a silent force that drives so much of our behavior, particularly in our younger years. We constantly seek validation from others, whether it's from family, friends, colleagues, or society at large. We think that if we can just gain their approval, we will feel worthy, accepted, and successful. This relentless pursuit becomes exhausting as we mold ourselves into what we believe others want us to be, often at the cost of our own authenticity. We allow their opinions to dictate our actions and decisions, and in doing so we lose sight of our own voice. But as the years pass, particularly after 60, you come to a powerful realization. Approval from others is fleeting and unreliable. True peace doesn't come from external validation, but from within. When you stop seeking approval, you reclaim your sense of self. You no longer have to measure your worth by someone else's yardstick. Instead, you learn to trust your own judgment, to be content with your own choices, and to accept that you are enough as you are, without needing to fit into anyone else's mold. The need for approval becomes less important, and what matters more is the strength of your own belief in yourself. Perfection is a concept that is ingrained in us from an early age, an ideal that we strive for, whether it's in our appearance, our work, or our relationships. For many years, we believed that if we could just reach that elusive state of flawlessness, we would finally be content, admired, and at peace. We labor tirelessly, editing every detail, refining every moment, believing that perfection will bring us validation and success. However, after 60, you begin to realize that perfection is an illusion, a standard that doesn't exist in the real world. The pursuit of it can become a prison, stifling creativity, growth, and genuine connection. What we come to understand is that imperfection is not something to be ashamed of. It is what makes us human. It is in our mistakes, our vulnerabilities, and our unique qualities that we find authenticity and depth. The more we embrace our imperfections, the more we free ourselves from the constant pressure to be something we were never meant to be. Perfection, when measured against the beauty of living authentically, fades into irrelevance. What matters more is the ability to embrace the journey, to learn from missteps, and to celebrate the imperfect, yet extraordinary, reality of who we are. Fear of change is a powerful force that holds many of us back throughout our lives. From an early age, we are taught to value stability and predictability, to seek comfort in the familiar, and to avoid the unknown. Change, in its many forms, is often seen as a threat to our sense of security, and as we grow older, this fear can intensify. We resist it, holding on to what we know, even when it no longer serves us, because the idea of stepping into the unknown feels overwhelming. However, after 60, you begin to see change in a different light. The fear that once paralyzed you becomes less of a shadow and more of a signal, a reminder that growth is possible only through transformation. Change is no longer something to be feared, but something to be embraced. It is through change that we evolve, learn, and find new avenues of fulfillment. Life is fluid, and trying to resist its natural flow only leads to frustration. The more we accept change, the more we come to understand that it is not something we must fight, but something we can partner with. In fact, it is often the very forces of change that bring the most profound and unexpected joys into our lives. For much of our lives, we are conditioned to believe that material success is the ultimate measure of a life well lived. The world teaches us that accumulating wealth, owning property, and achieving professional status are the markers of true success. We work tirelessly to build these material possessions, thinking that once we have them, we will find happiness and fulfillment. However, as the years pass, especially after 60, you begin to realize that material success, though it may offer comfort or temporary satisfaction, does not define true success. True fulfillment comes not from what we own, but from the richness of our experiences and relationships, the love we give and receive, the memories we create, the lives we touch. These are the things that truly matter. We learn that the joy derived from material possessions is fleeting, but the satisfaction that comes from living a meaningful life, full of purpose and connection, is lasting. The pursuit of material success can often blind us to the more profound and lasting treasures of life: contentment, inner peace, and the ability to make a positive difference in the world around us. As we grow older, we begin to understand that success is not about how much we accumulate, but about the depth of our relationships, the legacy we leave, and the peace we find within ourselves.